So welcome everybody to our what we're going to call our very first podcast. Actually, it's a sort of adaptation of what we call Chateau Chat. We've done quite a few Chateau Chats.
We have.
In a sense, it's like a different beast to Our Château Life.
So don't expect any painting or decorating, no hammers.
I will not lift a single tool whilst we talk.
No change there then.
Thanks. So there you go. So what are we going? So
I thought it would be really interesting because we get quite a few comments about this. People who are interested.
What about me not doing any DIY?
Not doing anything. Well, they're quite interested in buying a chateau themselves, or not just a chateau, but a property in France.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few tips and things that we learned through the process of doing it that we thought might be quite useful to share with you. I mean, we won't do this every time, and we probably won't even get through all of my list because I think we could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, we definitely could. Yeah.
So let's start with, how did we buy this place? How did we get here?
How did we get here?
Because we had the nightmare of doing this during COVID.
So, yeah, I mean, our history is in sort of like short history is that we used to run a quite high-end family portrait studio in Clapham in London. And COVID came at a really, for so many companies, came at a bad time. And because of the nature of what we did, we had to be close to people to photograph them, obviously. And it closed us down. So we had to liquidate the business. And so we were left with really nothing. And we had recently moved back to London to care for the business. And we were renting. So, we were looking for a property to live in London, weren't we?
Yeah.
And then you looked at me one day and went, what did you do?
Well, I just said, well, you've got a French passport, why don't we look in France?
Yeah.
Why don't we find a big old house in France?
And put that in context is that since Brexit, it's much more difficult for UK residents to be able to just move and live in France. So it's an enormous advantage to have a European passport, which I have a French passport, and that Claire is married to me. So the door was wide open. So it was comparatively easy to be able to do it.
I guess there's probably some stuff that we don't really know about in terms of other people getting visas and things like that, because obviously we went down the route of me making the very good decision to marry you quite a while ago.
What, just because I'm French?
Just so that I could get a chateau, yeah.
Whoa, that's a revelation. Whoa, I never thought about it that way.
Long-term planning.
Oh, it's because you love me.
No, long-term planning, forward thinking.
Oh, jeez.
Took what was like...
You managed to hide that one quite well. So then we abandoned looking for properties in the UK and found that actually probably the first thing you find is that your money goes a lot further in France. And not necessarily, I have to qualify that, not necessarily in big cities. I mean, in Paris, it's going to be the same as anywhere, any big metropolitan city.
But comparing sort of property prices for what we were looking at in London compared to what we could afford in the countryside here, there's no comparison. It's a 2-bedroom flat in London or a massive...
If you're lucky, I'm not even in, the better part of London. So, into a 21-room chateau in France. Not all bedrooms, I hasten to add. And so we started looking online, didn't we?
We did, because it was COVID. So I think in the dream world, we would have done many more visits to France and looked at many, many more chateaux. I always thought when we would be looking that we'd be looking at hundreds of them and touring loads and loads and loads, but that just wasn't possible during COVID. So we did it online instead. We looked at hundreds online and got all the details from the estate agents, worked out where they were.
But there's a very, very important point here, is that when you're looking at properties in the UK, they will publish the properties that are for sale with the address. So you can look at exactly where that property is. You can Google Street View, you can go and visit it if you want and check out the area. However, in France, it's very different.
They won't do that. And I think it's because of the way that the contracts work with the estate agents. It's basically they're worried that if you figure out where the property is, you could go and knock on their door and make them an offer and cut out the estate agent, and then the estate agent doesn't get their commission. So they're very careful about not telling you exactly where they are.
Yeah.
But because if you're looking at chateaus, they stand out very well on Google Maps. And generally, you will have been given the village that it's close to and some clues. You know, if you look at the pictures and there's a river or there's ornamental gardens and you've got maybe an overview of the chateau and its outbuildings, if you spend a bit of time on Google Maps, you will find it. With a little bit of detective work, you can find them. So that made a massive difference for us, being able to find them on Google Maps, because there were ones that we looked at and in the pictures they look perfect. And you look at it and you think, that's the one, I found it.
And the estate agents were always really surprised when we actually pinpointed. So so Claire became an absolute expert at this. I think if everything were to go completely wrong, she'd get a job like this at the CIA or MI6.
How do you know I don't already?
Enough surprises, you know, that you married me to buy a chateau based on a cake that your mother baked you when you were 6. I mean, come on, you know. Well, and then to find out that you work for, you know, a Secret Service agency.
Yeah.
Anyway. Neither of which I think is true, but there you go. Well, I hope not. Anyway, I don't know. We may have to have a discussion off camera. But yeah, she became excellent at this, and of course, the ones that we wanted to visit, we would get back in touch with them, and then we would say, "We are talking about this one here, aren't we? At this address." And it's almost like the shock was palpable, you know, that we were able to find it.
But it saved us an awful lot of hassle, because there was one particular one that I remember which was absolutely beautiful. It was stunning. And honestly, he looked at the details and just went, well, I barely even need to visit it. I can tell, you know, it's perfect. It's got everything I want. And then I looked on Google Maps and it was literally at the end of a runway for an airport. Honestly, you could have gone down the runway, turned off, there you were at the chateau.
But literally at the end of a runway.
So and opened on the floor.
So, you know, there were lots of funny stories. You know, there was another one with a big factory nearby. And the estate agent, when we pointed that out, you know, and the fact that they hadn't mentioned it, which I suppose they wouldn't really, and the estate agent went, oh don't worry, it's going to close next year. And go, how do you know that?
I'd like to point out that agent was not the one, the company that we...
Not the company that No, not at all. It was, well, we can mention that it was not Lenail, as we would say. Most definitely not.
So I guess that's going out of order here, but that's actually a very good tip, is finding a good estate agent and trusting them and going with them. So we used... well, in English, you'd call it Cabinet Lenail, if you want to write it out. And they were excellent, and they are experts in chateaus. You know, you look at their website and it is gorgeous.
It's just full of, it's just like bursting with chateaus and manoirs and maison de maître and some really absolute, you know, we're not being paid by these people. It's just, you know, our experience with them was excellent, actually. And here's another example, is that outside both entrances to the chateau, the front and the back, there are some enormous Medici metal pots. I mean, you know, they're big, they're like this. And for some unknown reason, I think we both assumed that when you buy a house, these are included. And
so we're in the old photographs that we found of the house from 100 years ago and stuff like that.
Yeah. And And anyway, we were talking about money with these people. We put an offer in, and then as you went further down the line, they accepted the offer. But then as you got closer and closer to having to exchange any money, it became apparent that bits like that were most definitely not included. So quite a few thousand more euros were paid to be able to keep these pots.
And we thought it was very important to keep them with the house because they were in the old photographs.
Yeah.
They are very much a part of the place.
Very much part of the place. And we know, in fact, funnily enough, we know the auctioneer in our local town who are absolutely delightful. And he was saying that he was invited here to look at the furniture that they were selling off before they moved. And he said, I wasn't really interested in the furniture. However, I wanted the Medici pots. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside. But anyway, so we got the Medici pots. But it's worth keeping that in mind. If you are going to buy a big property like this, if there's a statue in the garden, they're going to ask you to pay for it. It's not going to be part of the selling price.
Don't assume that everything's included. And that also comes down to kitchens as well. I mean, we're okay that they left the kitchen here, but we have heard stories about people taking out fitted kitchens and everything. So you just have an empty room. So you really do have to be aware of those things.
Be aware and also be very specific, because when you put an offer in, you can be in a position where you can say, but I want this to be included in the contract, which is like Medici pots, the kitchen. You may find that your chateau has curtains, and believe me, curtains in a place like this with the height of the ceilings are really expensive and also quite essential, because in winter you close them, makes the room really cozy. So there were like little things like, the other thing disappeared when we moved in was some of the outbuildings. They were full of firewood, absolutely like right up to the ceiling. We got here, all gone. He'd sold it to the local woodsmith.
Yeah, which is fair enough. But also some of the outbuildings were full of rubbish, and we specified that they had to clear those out before we got here.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, one of them they certainly cleared out and dumped down the riverbank. So they cleared out the building, but dumped it in the garden.
Down the riverbank. So I guess the lesson to be learned is one that be very, very specific about everything, and never take anything as read. Really, never think, they'll leave that. We still have one lamp bulb in the salon hanging off the ceiling, because they took all the lighting, and legally they have to leave lighting where they've taken the actual light away. But that really is like 2 wires and a lamp bulb.
It's just a bare bulb. That's what we've got in every room, just bare bulbs everywhere.
Yeah.
Which is, it's all understandable, but it's about making sure you know that before you arrive, so that you're not disappointed when you get here and think that some beautiful chandelier was going to be included that you fell in love with, and then it's gone.
The other thing, which was interesting, very interesting actually, when we put our offer in and it was accepted after a bit of backwards and forwards, there was a bit, inevitably there always is a little bit of dealing going on. So we got the price that we wanted to, went down a little bit. However, our intention normally, in my mind, I always think, from the point when your offer is accepted, talking about 3 months before you can move in, normally about that. It's never usually more than that. However, the seller, when we said we wanted to move in 3 months, accused us of throwing him and his family out into the street. Well, you're the one who's selling, mate. Anyway, he insisted on 6 months?
7 months.
7 months.
And we got him down to 6 months. So, which was a crazy long time to wait. But one of the really good things about the French system, I don't know how it compares to America or the rest of the world, but compared to the UK, when you put in your offer in France and it's accepted, you have to pay a deposit immediately.
Sizable deposit.
It's like 10% or something, isn't it? Or is it more? But it's a lot of money immediately. But the great thing about that is then it's yours. You know, you don't have to worry about somebody coming and making a better offer or...
In England, it's called gazumping. So somebody will come along and make a better offer, and then the seller will just go, okay, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go with them because they're offering me more money.
And that can happen right up into the last minute in the UK. You could be a week away from thinking you were buying a house, and then somebody offers them a few grand more and you've lost one.
I mean, it can happen, but if it does happen, then they lose. Hang on. So the deposit.
Yeah. So how was it? So if we walked away, if we changed our minds and didn't buy the chateau, we would have lost our deposit. But if they changed their minds, they would have had to have paid all our fees.
Yeah.
I think some sort of compensation as well.
I believe so. I'm not 100% about that, but it's very difficult.
It locks them in. So you don't have to stress so much as you would in the UK, thinking that something might go wrong and you're going to lose it. Because once you've paid your deposit, you're
pretty much there. It's just it's going to cost them a lot of money if they change their mind, really, and if you change your mind as well. So you have to be really sure of your position.
Which is something, if you're coming from the UK and you're getting a mortgage and you're selling in the UK, that's something you're going to have to think about in terms of like the cash flow of whether you've got the money for the deposit first. I mean, we were lucky because we'd sold our house previously and we were renting, so we had it spare, so it was easy for us. But for that, you need to speak to a specialist. And there are like English, French companies that will do all of this for you in English and in French and help you out with all of it and help you understand it.
Yeah. And going back to the Medici pots, at the time, you know, I was horrified, and I spoke to our lawyer who was dealing with the purchase of the house, of the chateau. And she was French, and she said she was horrified as well. She thought that it was completely wrong, that they should be charging more. And actually, it was the estate agent who had a quiet word in our ear and went, actually, your lawyer is wrong. They are doing what they're entitled to do. So, you know, you've really got to know your stuff when you start getting involved in this, because the laws are so different in different countries. You know, you cannot just make an assumption that, you know, what you feel is right in our case in the UK, or maybe in your case in the States, will be the same here, because it won't be. It'll be very different.
Don't assume. Don't assume.
Yeah, never assume. Always ask. There's a tendency, isn't there, when we're dealing with things like this, to try and give the impression that you know, we're in charge and we know exactly what's going on. There's a real advantage to actually turning to the estate agent and going, I need some help here because I'm a bit lost, and admitting to the fact that you need help. And that's what they're there for. They're selling to you. The estate agent will help you.
Yeah, it's their job to make this happen.
Yeah.
They want the sale to go through without any problems.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And something else to look forward to, which you're going to have to recount, which I thought it was just hysterical, was when you come to signing the contract.
So you do that in person. I don't think you always have to do it in person, but we had to do it in person at the notaire's office. And so you go there with the people that you're buying from. The estate agent came with us as well. And we had our solicitor on a video screen, and then they were there with theirs. So everybody was talking to each other in a room. And we had, you know, packed up our life in the UK and come here. So we were in the car with one dog and one cat at the time. And we went into this appointment thinking, it's going to be like half an hour, sign some bits of paper. And because he was having a little computer trouble.
And his office looked like Cape Canaveral when we walked in. It was extraordinary.
But he hadn't downloaded all the paperwork beforehand, and he had to go through it all and get us all to sign it all. So we were there for 4 hours, and this was in June, and it was boiling hot. And so after like the first, like,
for you guys in America, no air conditioning.
Yeah, no such thing as air conditioning.
No.
So after like the first 10 minutes, I'm getting twitchy because the animals are in the car, and I'm going, no. Okay, I'll go and get the dog. So I went and got Mimi the dog. I asked, this is going to take a while, can I bring the dog in? And then it was taking a bit longer. It's like, no, okay, I'm going to have to go and bring the cat in as well. So then we're sat in this office, all of us, and at COVID time as well. So we've all got our masks on, plus Mimi and Nusha.
Oh, we did have masks on, didn't we? And then we had Godfroy from the estate agency sitting in the back. He was like the naughty boy in the class, was screaming at, how much longer is this going to take? And
yeah, he was very good at keeping morale up.
Yeah, he was actually. Yeah. He kept us smiling, I must say. He was very good.
Because it's quite a stressful situation, strangely, because you've gone through the process with the sellers of, negotiating, and you don't really expect to then spend that much time with them, and then to spend 4 hours on what's a very emotional day for them, because they had been here for 27 years, raised their family here. It's a very difficult thing.
Yeah, it's just a very difficult thing. Absolutely. I really understand that. And, but anyway, so we did it. But then of course, all our belongings were winging their way down the motorway from the UK in France in a large articulated lorry. And the intention was that we would be done and dusted. We'd be in the chateau and we'd wait for their arrival. But because it took 4 hours or whatever to sign the blasted bit of paper, when we got to the front gates, there was this massive articulated lorry with all our things, all our chattels in there waiting for us.
And they just had the afternoon to unload, and they did it. Two guys managed to do everything in an afternoon.
They were extraordinary,
absolutely amazing,
really fast.
So I would, if we were ever doing it again, I'd add in a day's delay, I think, there to give yourself a bit of time for things to go wrong. I think a bit more padding time. But again, this was COVID. Things were complicated. We didn't really have that many options. But we got there. We got here. We're in.
We did.
Yeah.
So another aspect of this is deciding where you want to be.
Where you want to be is really important, because when we were looking, there was one other place that I fell in love with. It was a dream place for me, and went to view it, and I really, really liked it. And I was a little bit annoyed with you when you said no, but actually it was the right decision, because it was in the wrong place. It was a beautiful chateau, but it was not in a place where we want to be.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. Yeah. We better not mention it because they follow us on Instagram.
Yeah, and it's absolutely beautiful, but it was too far from anything that we want, actually. It was a couple of hours from the coast, which is too far for us. We want to be closer to the beach. It was too far from a big town, and it was next to a main road. And you know that once the initial honeymoon period wears off of, I've bought a chateau, it's incredible.
Oh, and a small fact was it was falling apart.
Well, yes, it was falling apart as well. But this is more about location. Once you've got over the dream period of, oh my goodness, I bought a chateau. Yes, you're going to spend the first few months just in your building, looking at it, loving it, having a wonderful time. But then after a while, you're like, oh, hang on, going to the supermarket, that's a bit of a bore. That's quite a long way. And, going and doing any of the administrative stuff that you have to do when you move to France, if it's a few hours every time, that can get very boring. That can get very annoying if you've isolated yourself too much. So you do have to, a lot of the decision is with your heart, but some of it does have to be with your head as well of, forget about the chateau. Would I be happy living in that spot if I was living in any other building? Does that work for me and my life and work and family?
I think also when we started looking much further north than where we are at the moment. We're sort of level with La Rochelle in France, and which is on the west coast. And we started looking much further north near Le Mans, which is about 2 hours away, I guess, on the motorway. And every time we went there, it was cold and raining and grey and depressing. And I think for me, for both of us, I think we looked at that and we thought, well, yeah, it's too far north, and then we thought, well, how much? So yeah, and also we want access to the beach and stuff like that, and then we thought, okay, so if we look at the map of France, and then we saw La Rochelle, and we both knew La Rochelle. No, you knew La Rochelle.
I've been on holiday near here many years ago.
Yeah, I didn't know La Rochelle, but I knew Bordeaux further south, which in effect is another 2 hours further south. And so to find somewhere in betweeny seemed to make a lot of sense. But of course, you've got to be aware that really, like, the further south you go in France, the prices start going that way because you're getting warmer and warmer. And it becomes more of a holiday spot, I suppose. So the furthest south that we could come within reason in terms of price of chateau was where we are, really. We're about 40 minutes away from La Rochelle. So that was an important decision.
And that was very sensible. We were very sensible about it, actually.
Well, we are.
Sometimes you feel like this is like, I know we talk about it a lot, of this sort of like mad romantic idea of buying a chateau and the dream chateau, and I had a birthday cake and it looked like this and all of that, but we were sensible with it.
And you have to be so careful about that because, buying a property like this that is so beautiful and has so much history to it, and so much potential for you to turn it into your little personal heaven. You cannot get away from the romanticism attached with buying a place like this. But you have to step outside that like little sort of like purple, fluffy, sugary box and just go, right, okay, well, yeah, in a minute I'll be back. But right now, I have to step outside. I had to slap myself hard around the face, and I'd say, right, in the cold light of day, do I want to spend time here? You don't know realistically. You don't know until you live here whether you like it or not. But you can take all the steps necessary to try and make sure that you are making the right decision. And those include, having a reasonably sized town nearby. Supermarkets,
hospital if you fall off a ladder when you're doing it.
Yeah, no, listen, joking apart, right? You're still very young and healthy, and I'm 65, and for 65 I'm doing all right. But when you get to sort of my age, things start falling off, and you need you no, they don't. But you need to know that there is a hospital, a good hospital nearby. And there is here. There's a very good, about half an hour's drive away. Yeah. Which, admittedly, half an hour. But then half an hour, it'd take you half an hour to get within 10 minutes of a hospital in London. Yeah, so,
It would. I always talk about it as future-proofing. Yes, we might be fine now, but
I'm not sure how to take that one.
I want to live here for a very long time. So you've got to choose something that, are you still going to be okay here in 10 years' time? Or 10 years' time? Are you going to be all right?
Do you know that my darling wife has already talked about putting a lift in? She's looked for a place to put a lift in at one end, so that when I can't actually walk up the stairs,
there's a lift. What? Because it makes sense.
Didn't think I'd last that long.
It makes sense to think about it now, just to have a vague idea of where it was going to go. Because if we then, put a bathroom in the wrong place and then suddenly thought, oh no, that's the perfect place for a lift, then we're not going to do it for years and years and years. But at least it means that area is clear.
And you know that you can if you want to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very true.
Redo something.
Yeah. So I suppose long story short is that you have to force yourself to be really very, very serious about where you're going to be. Don't allow yourself to...
don't kid yourself.
Don't kid yourself. Don't go, oh, it'll be all right on the night, because it won't be. Don't kid yourself. be really honest with yourself. Don't fall for the whole romanticism thing. Wait for that when you're in here and you've got one room that's done up, and then you can get romantic about it. But until then, no, please don't kid yourself. Because I say that a lot, actually.
I do say that a lot because, we love it. We've done it. We're here. We're living in a chateau. We've got friends now that we've made that live in chateaus. And it is fabulous. Don't get us wrong. I highly recommend it. This is a wonderful place to live. But if you're going to do it, I want you to do it well, to not come and then after a couple of years go, oh, we made the wrong choice. This is too difficult. We're in the wrong place, stuff like that. And, on the chateau circuit, you do hear stories about people that have tried it and had to give up, and sort of the sense of disappointment in having to sell it again because you didn't quite get it right. It's not the end of the world, is it? But
no, it's not the end of the world. But also another very important point actually is when you look at a property. That there are lots of chateaus. There are thousands of chateaus to choose from, and think this. I realize this is anathema, but think of your chateau as a pile of bricks. It's an investment. Now, a lot of chateaus you won't be able to resell. So the money that you put into a chateau, you got to be really careful because you probably won't be able to resell it. Certainly not for the money that you've paid, unless you've invested so much that you've actually turned it into really a beautiful private haven that people can walk into and just live and enjoy. So look at your potential chateau, your potential new home in France, as an investment. Think, if I don't like living here, can I do it up, make it look beautiful, make it work, keep it warm in winter? Can I prepare it so that when I make a decision I don't want to live here anymore, I can sell it and sell it easily and sell it well? Think that way all the time, because you can never be sure that you're going to want to spend the rest of your life in this place, ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And really think about the things that you're going to spend money on, whether they're worth it. And one thing that we found very interesting when we were looking is there's sort of like a price point when you're looking at these buildings. Some of them will come with an awful lot of outbuildings. You can look at a place and it's got 10, 20 outbuildings. But actually, the prices sort of go down when you get to that point, because what is any normal person going to do with 20 outbuildings? Unless you want to run a massive hotel or venue and you think you've got a use for all these buildings, they're actually, they're a hindrance. We've got 2 big buildings out there that need new roofs and windows and a lot of work done on the walls. Just those are going to cost us an awful lot of money, but we need to do the chateau first. So it's like...
And I'd just like to point out, we don't know where the money is coming from. It's not like we have a big pot of money sitting there waiting. We're just going to keep it until we're ready. No, we don't. So we don't even know if we're ever going to be able to do them.
So we may not have necessarily followed all of our own advice.
No, we don't. But this is why we're giving you advice, isn't it, really?
So think about it. If you've found, a perfect place and it's got lots of outbuildings, think about what you're going to do with them, because they can become just a cost. And one of the estate agents said, well, just knock them down, get rid of them. Don't pay for new roofs on buildings.
And of course, to knock them down and to clear it out, it's going to cost you 50,000 spondoolies, per building, right? So that's a real cost as well. So that's why people don't knock them down. They just let them fall apart. I don't want to let them fall apart. But even if you think, oh, I've got, 3 or 4 outbuildings, I can turn them into gîtes. I can rent them out. Yeah, sure you can. Of course you can. But if that's your idea, is to turn it into gîtes, then you really have to think of it as a business. There's no point buying a place with room for like 50 gîtes in the middle of nowhere, where there's nowhere for people to go or visit or be a tourist in.
You've got to think about, why would they come and stay with you? What is there around you? What reason would they have to stay here?
And also on top of it, okay, let's say that you are in a great place and you've got loads of, potential gîtes. It's got to be full most of the time, and when it's not, you still got to heat that thing, because the moment the heating goes off in these big buildings, you get mold on the walls. It just becomes unbearable. You get sort of like condensation running down the walls. So you need to have a bare minimum of heating in all these buildings all the time throughout the winter. So it sounds, it's difficult, and yes, it is difficult, but it's doable.
It's doable. It's all doable. I think we're going to have to do this as a regular series, because this one might have been a bit of a downer. But it's really about going into it with your eyes open, and being really sensible with yourself.
But finding the right chateau. So we. So like Claire said, we were doing this during COVID, and it was during lockdown all over the world, I suppose, certainly in France and the UK. But you could still travel, oddly, from one country to another. And so we came over on 3 occasions.
Yep.
And, oh, my goodness, the paperwork that we had to fill out was legend. It was like, you turn up at the border with like a book. We haven't filled that in or signed that. Anyway, it was a great time to travel in France, because the motorways were empty.
The tunnel we were doing was empty.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And as it turns out, we actually did find not the one that you really loved. I know which one that is, but we actually did find one which, as what was further north, was beautiful, absolutely beautiful, but had been renovated really, really, really badly, and renovated by the owners, who were not equipped to do it properly. And
no, they did their own electrics, and that became evident. You went into the little shower room that they had just off the master bedroom, and they had like a walk-in shower. And at floor level with the shower tray, about 2 centimeters above the shower tray, was a plug socket. And I don't know what it was for. I don't know what they're thinking they were going to plug in there, but
shaver.
Madness, just absolute madness. And that was just what we noticed on the first look around. What about all the things that we didn't notice? Which brings us on to the point of get a survey done.
Yeah. No, there's something very interesting, actually really good, really fantastic in France, is that there's an insistence when you buy something that a survey meeting the French government's requirements is made. And the survey is different from like surveys that we would have done in the UK. And it covers a lot of ground, but it doesn't cover enough ground for us. So we actually hired weirdly enough, an English surveyor, who
works in France,
who works in France
in French property, lives in France, but knows what the English are looking for.
And we asked him to survey this place that we first fell in love with, and he came back with like, don't touch it with a barge pole, don't go anywhere near it, and so we just took it as advice, and he was right.
Yeah, he was absolutely right.
The supporting beams under this thing were being held up by a Meccano set bits of metal that had been knocked up, together by some idiot. And it was an utter nightmare. The electrics were awful. You'd have to literally rip everything out and start again. They'd spent a fortune on the kitchen and not a fortune on on the really important structural parts of the building, which will keep it standing, basically. It was beautiful, this place.
Yeah, the potential for it was stunning. And it had the most incredible walled garden, which I was still a bit bitter about, and an orangery, a ruined orangery that could have been extraordinary as well. But it would not have been a sensible choice. We would have got in there, and after a few weeks, we would have just gone, what have we done? Because the first thing we would have to have done was spend probably hundreds of thousands making it safe.
Yeah, which we didn't have. So, so it was so think of it that way. Look at the building that you're looking at. Look at the roof. So, pardon me. So we had maybe 2 or 3 important criteria that we stuck to religiously when we looked at buildings, chateaus. And that was the roof had to be in reasonably good condition. And by that, I mean, we would not have to replace it. Maybe a few repairs, only a few. I mean, I'm talking about, like a handful, whatever of repairs was acceptable. On these buildings, the external render is very expensive to replace. And on both those counts, in Château de La Vergne, the roof had been done something like 11 years earlier, and the rendering, I think, about similar time. Yeah. So it was all in really good nick.
Brand new, yeah.
When you put a new roof on like this, a slate roof, you're talking about 50, 60 years before you have to really realistically do anything to it. So we've got another 50 years, basically. So be very, very aware, be really critical, be serious. This is your money you're spending.
You can do all the romance stuff later and get all excited. Once you've done your sensible stuff, then you can get all excited about decorating and parties and all of that. But yeah, be very, very sensible.
And don't kid yourself.
Don't kid yourself.
That's the best bit of advice I can give you. Do never, never allow yourself to say, oh no, that'll be okay.
It'll be fine.
No, it won't. So, well, it might be, but don't kid yourself.
I think that's probably it for today.
I think that's it for today. There's quite a lot to go through. Well done, Danny. Really good list here.
Actually, each heading is a whole podcast in itself.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. So normally we're a bit more funny and a bit more chirpy, but actually felt that this was a good thing to do seriously.
Yeah, it's a good thing to begin with. Well, maybe we'll intersperse it with silliness at some point or another. I've forgotten how to be silly.
But I've part of the reason for doing this is I feel a slight responsibility because we're showing off our chateau on YouTube and showing all the best bits of it. I don't want people to think it's easy. I don't want people to think it's that it's a quick decision that they can make. There was a lot of thought behind all of this. We may laugh and joke and do silly things, but there is a lot of thought and thinking, and it's been a long process.
Phenomenal amount of thought and planning, and but it's not really planning. It's really part of the not kidding yourself is questioning your thinking. And saying, am I looking at this in the cold light of day, or am I looking at this with as my granny used to say, rose pink coloured glasses on, and you have to remove your pink rose coloured glasses and really look at it in a cold light of day, in the purest kind of honesty that you can achieve, i.e. never kidding yourself. Always ask yourself the difficult questions. Anyway, there you go. God, dear, we have been very serious, haven't we?
Serious. All right, next one.
Should we do a little dance? I keep a few people happy, but there you go. So we'll leave it at that, and then we will see you for possibly, we may not return to this immediately for our next podcast.
No, I think next time we'll tell you more about what we've been up to.
Yeah.
But we thought this was a good one, and we'll touch in on it as well. But if you've got any questions, let us know. Send us an email or let us know in the comments, and we can cover it.
Yeah, really, it's always really good to get sort of like comments and questions, because then we can really address the worries, because we know that there are quite a lot of people looking in France to buy chateaus right now. So hopefully, we can tell you, if we can help you, then put you in the right direction. Anyway, we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Bye.